to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Joining us is a very special guest, one of our Newsmax columnists and former member of the Newsmax Board of Directors, Arnaud de Borchgrave. He's a legendary reporter, one of the great journalists in America, former editor of the Washington Times and chief correspondent for Newsweek. He is also the director and senior advisor of Transnational Threats Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Nice to see you again, Arnaud.
My pleasure, Kathleen.
You and I last talked about 2 weeks ago, and since then so much has changed. We've had yet another attempted terror attack on a U.S. airline, and as a result, the Obama administration was sharply criticized for security lapses. The TSA announced Sunday that passengers flying into the United States from Nigeria, Yemen, and other countries of interest will be subject to enhanced screening techniques. What's your analysis of the Obama administration's response to this attack?
I think it's been very weak. What we saw on television on last Sunday was trying to make the best of a very bad situation. Clearly, we had all sorts of signals about a Nigerian who obviously was in touch with Al-Qaeda, that checked in without baggage, that paid for his ticket in cash. I mean, there were a dozen signals. And the CIA, his father talked to the CIA in Nigeria, and that was relayed to the CIA. As I understand the story, it was also relayed to the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, where something fell apart. The problem with our intelligence agents is we have 16 of them employing 100,000 people with a budget of $50 billion, and half of the analysts have only 7 years of service because they were mostly hired after 9/11.
The United States has closed its embassy in Yemen after learning that Al-Qaeda may attack in the capital city. Britain followed suit and some other Western nations as well. Obama's counterterrorism advisor, John Brennan, says that the U.S. is worried about the spread of terrorism in Yemen, but doesn't consider the country a second front with Afghanistan and Pakistan in the fight against terrorism. To what extent should we be concerned about Yemen, and should we have been more cognizant of signs about the development of terrorism in that country?
Well, we got a very big warning signal in October of the year 2000 when a small boat blew a big hole in the USS Cole, killed 17 U.S. sailors, wounded 37. It was a $1 billion warship that was out of commission for 2 years. The repair bill was $250 million, and that was done for $10,000. We discovered that in Kabul. After the liberation of Kabul in Afghanistan, we found all sorts of papers in Al-Qaeda safe houses, including the bill for that particular attack, $10,000. Yemen has been huge in the Al-Qaeda framework for a very long time. And we have a base in the Horn of Africa in Djibouti, which is almost solely oriented towards Yemen and Somalia. There are 1,800 Marines there, and their helicopter missions go in on the QT occasionally into both Yemen and Somalia.
What is your reaction to John Brennan saying on Fox News Sunday that there was no smoking gun that would have tipped off authorities to the fact that this Nigerian was plotting to bring down the plane?
I would call that twaddle in all its un-Russian splendor. It's ridiculous to maintain such a thing, but he's trying to put the best face possible on a very bad situation. I've known him for a long time. He's a highly competent man. He was even considered to be in the running to run the CIA. I've known him for a long time. He belonged to one of my task forces at CSIS, at the Center for Strategic Studies. So I cannot praise the man highly enough, but he was trying to put the best face possible on an impossible situation.
Do you agree with Vice President Cheney's assessment that the administration's reluctance to acknowledge the war on terror has left us more vulnerable?
Well, it hasn't refused to acknowledge the war on terror. I mean, after all, we are continuing exactly what the previous administration was doing. I think where this administration went wrong is by trying to tell us that the reason for continuing the war in Afghanistan was Al-Qaeda. The President Obama even said that is where Al-Qaeda is. Well, that is precisely where it is not. But he had to be in favor of one of the two wars. He was against Iraq. Had he come out against Afghanistan as well, he would not be president today.
Politics aside, the Bush administration interrogated suspects caught plotting terrorist strikes for operational intelligence. Now they are lawyered up and read their Miranda Rights. Do you worry that vital information that could stave off future plots may be lost due to this new approach to how terror suspects are handled?
No question about it. The British have had a very hands-off any kind of physical pressure for a long time. Britain is in a very bad situation. Practically all the plots that they are watching now track back to Pakistan. Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen, the three most important places. And the Brits have had to put up with a lot of things because of human rights considerations. But bit by bit, they've got their handle on all the terrorist activities that are being plotted in England today. It's about 200 plus plots that they have picked up by telephone taps and things like that, all tracking back to Pakistan.
Prior to the Christmas Day terror attack on the plane, which obviously was thwarted, extremists had talked about blowing up planes on the internet. You recently wrote an article and commentary about the spread and development of terrorism via the web. To what extent are terrorism and jihad spreading via the web, and what, if anything, can be done about it?
I think that's where most of them are recruited. You have sons of middle-class families in the Middle West, either from Somalia or even Yemen. They are rather bored with their lives, and they go online and they suddenly find themselves with an Al-Qaeda site. Al-Qaeda has thousands of websites today. Prior to 9/11, they only had 50 or so. Now they have thousands. And these kids get snapped into this global caliphate, that is the Muslim world uniting all over the world and standing up to the West, because they are taught on these online that the West is determined to destroy Islam. And that's how these kids are recruited.
You also recently wrote about the development of terrorism within Great Britain. You pointed out that British authorities verified that as many as 3,000 veterans of al-Qaeda training camps over the years were born and raised in the UK, and that British polls showed that about 100,000 British Muslims were in favor of the 2005 subway and bus attacks in London. Does Great Britain have a problem on its hands?
It's a huge problem, and they've admitted this for a long time. And also the biggest problem for us is that these Pakistani Brits are allowed to come to the United States without a visa because they are British citizens. That too is a big problem for us. The overwhelming majority of them approved of 9/11. And then you have others who claim that 9/11 is a fraud because it was done by Mossad and the CIA in order to pursue the destruction of Islam. So you have all these different currents, cross currents among the Pakistani Brits, and there are many of them, that make it a very dangerous situation for Great Britain, and their internal security service, I think, today is better than the FBI's at home.
How did this problem develop?
It developed because of decolonization. After Britain gave up its colonies, after Britain gave up all of its responsibilities east of Suez, between the Suez Canal and Singapore in 1968, they had to allow these people in because you can't tell the people you've colonized and developed, I'm sorry, but you can't come now to the home country. And that was a general policy in France, in Belgium, and in the UK for those who had colonies.
Let's switch gears real quickly and talk about another looming threat for the U.S., and that is Iran. Iranian media on Sunday reported that Tehran will conduct a large-scale defensive military exercise next month to coincide with what government officials now say is a deadline for the West to respond to its counteroffer to a nuclear fuel deal. Tehran says it would agree to swap the bulk of its low-enriched uranium for higher-enriched uranium, but in small batches and on Iranian soil. What progress has the Obama administration made with Iran as it relates to its nuclear program, and has diplomacy had the opposite effect?
I don't think there's been any advance. You're dealing with an ancient civilization. Today, whether you have mullahs in power, or colonels, or generals, or Democrats in Iran, they are determined to acquire a nuclear weapon. 4 of the world's 8 nuclear powers are in their region. Russia to the north, Israel to the west, India and Pakistan to the east. And we're telling them, sorry, but you can't have nuclear weapons. Everybody else can, but you can't. So there they have legitimate security concerns. Obviously, they also have aggressive concerns throughout the region, and that's what terrifies a lot of people, is that there is now a growing convergence between Iran and Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden's family has been living in Iran since 9/11. Several children and a couple of wives, as I recall. So all of this is moving, it seems to me, towards a convergence of Iran's ambitions throughout the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda's. And Al-Qaeda's ambition is to get rid of all the royal regimes up and down the Gulf, the sheikdoms, the emirates. They both have a convergence of interests, and that's something to watch in the coming months.
All right, Arnaud de Borchgrave, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and an honor to speak with you. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.